Well, the British royals have posed for a new formal photograph. You notice there she's the only splash of color in this picture, but take a close look at her tiara.
For most people watching that glittering royal evening unfold, it seemed like nothing more than another elegant state banquet. The gowns were flawless, the diamonds sparkled beneath the chandeliers, and the royal family performed its duties with the polished confidence the world has come to expect. Yet hidden within the spectacle was a single decision that would ignite debate across Britain and far beyond its borders. When Catherine, Princess of Wales, stepped into view wearing one of the most emotionally charged pieces in the royal collection, attention shifted almost instantly. What should have been a celebration of diplomacy suddenly became something far more complicated. Because this was not simply a tiara, it was a symbol, and for many royal watchers, symbols often reveal more than words ever can. The moment photographs from the event began circulating online, observers noticed something familiar resting on Catherine's head. It was the Cambridge lover's knot tiara, a dazzling creation of diamonds and pearls that carries decades of royal history. Yet the discussion that followed was not primarily about its beauty. Instead, it centered on the woman most associated with it, Diana, Princess of Wales. Almost immediately, social media filled with side-by-side images comparing Catherine and Diana. Commentators revisited photographs from state banquets decades earlier. Television panels discussed the significance of the choice. Even people who rarely follow royal news found themselves drawn into the conversation. Why had the Princess of Wales chosen this particular tiara again? Was it merely a personal favorite, or was there a deeper message hidden beneath the diamonds and pearls? That question alone would have been enough to spark debate. But another development quickly added a new layer of intrigue. According to various reports and royal commentators, the renewed focus on Diana's legacy once again overshadowed other senior members of the monarchy. And that inevitably led attention toward Queen Camilla. For years, Camilla has worked carefully to establish her own position within the institution. The journey has not been easy. Public perceptions, shaped during the turbulent years of King Charles III's marriage to Diana, have proven remarkably persistent. Although decades have passed, Diana's memory continues to occupy a unique place in the public imagination. This raises an interesting question. Can any royal event involving Diana's most iconic possessions ever remain solely about the present? Or does the past inevitably return whenever those symbols reappear? The answer may be more significant than many people realize. Long before Catherine became one of the most admired members of the royal family, the lover's knot tiara had already acquired an almost mythical reputation. Originally commissioned for Queen Mary in the early 20th century, the piece was intended to represent continuity, tradition, and royal prestige. Yet history had other plans. When Diana began wearing the tiara during her years as Princess of Wales, it gradually transformed into something else entirely. It ceased to be simply a royal jewel. Instead, it became intertwined with her public image, her struggles, and her extraordinary ability to connect with ordinary people. As a result, every appearance of a tiara now carries emotional weight that extends far beyond fashion. And this is where the story becomes particularly fascinating. Unlike many royal jewels that remain relatively unknown outside specialist circles, the lover's knot possesses an identity of its own. People recognize it instantly. They associate it with memories. They attach emotions to it. In many ways, it has become one of the most powerful visual reminders of Diana's enduring influence on the monarchy. So when Catherine chooses to wear it, observers naturally search for meaning. Some royal experts believe the choice represents continuity between generations of princesses of Wales. Others argue that it reflects Catherine's understanding of public sentiment and her appreciation of Diana's lasting popularity. Still others suggest the explanation may be simpler, that she genuinely loves the tiara and values its place within royal tradition. Yet if the answer were truly that simple, why does the discussion return every single time? Why do headlines immediately shift toward Diana whenever the tiara appears? Why do conversations about the future of the monarchy suddenly become conversations about its past? Those questions reveal something important about the institution itself. The British monarchy is built on history. Every ceremony, every title, every symbol connects one generation to another. But history can be both an asset and a burden. The same memories that strengthen public affection can also reopen old debates that many within palace walls would prefer to leave behind. For King Charles III, maintaining stability during a period of transition remains a central challenge. For Prince William, the Prince of Wales, the future of the crown increasingly depends on balancing tradition with modern expectations. And for Catherine, whose popularity continues to grow both in Britain and internationally, even the smallest choices are now examined for deeper meaning. Which brings us back to the moment that started this entire conversation. Was Catherine simply honoring royal tradition? Was she paying tribute to Diana's memory? Or did the appearance of the lovers not unintentionally revive emotions and comparisons that some members of the royal household would rather avoid? Whatever the answer may be, one thing became impossible to ignore. What appeared to be a routine fashion choice had already evolved into a much larger discussion about legacy, memory, public perception, and the future direction of the monarchy itself. And as royal insiders and commentators continued dissecting the significance of that single glittering tiara, another question began emerging, one that would take the story in an even more unexpected direction. Because some observers were no longer asking why Catherine wore Diana's favorite tiara. They were asking what it revealed about the relationships behind palace doors. Because once attention shifted from the tiara itself to the people surrounding it, the conversation entered far more sensitive territory. Royal jewelry can carry symbolism, but symbolism becomes truly powerful when it intersects with relationships, public perception, and the future direction of the institution. That is precisely why this particular appearance generated such an unusually intense reaction among commentators and royal observers. What makes the situation especially fascinating is that the discussion was never really confined to Catherine alone. Instead, it quickly expanded into a broader examination of influence within the modern monarchy. After all, the Princess of Wales currently occupies a unique position inside the royal family. Her popularity remains remarkably strong. Her public image has largely avoided major controversy, and many observers increasingly view her as a central figure in the monarchy's long-term future. That reality inevitably creates comparisons. Not necessarily because anyone inside the palace encourages them, but because public attention naturally gravitates toward individuals perceived as representing the next chapter of the royal story. As a result, every major appearance by the Princess of Wales is often interpreted through a different lens than appearances by other senior royals. And that raises an important question. What happens when one member of the institution becomes the focus of public fascination while others are simultaneously trying to establish their own legacy? For Queen Camilla, that question carries particular significance. Over the years, she has spent considerable effort building a public role defined by consistency, charitable work, and support for King Charles III. The transformation of her public image has been one of the most remarkable developments in modern royal history. Yet even after years of service, many discussions about her continue to circle back toward events that occurred decades ago. Why? Because royal history rarely remains in the past. Unlike political leaders who eventually leave office or celebrities who move beyond particular chapters of their careers, members of the monarchy exist within an ongoing narrative that spans generations. Previous events remain permanently connected to present-day realities. Old relationships continue influencing new perceptions. Former controversies often resurface when least expected. The appearance of the lovers' not tiara demonstrated exactly how powerful that phenomenon remains. Almost overnight, online conversations became dominated by photographs, memories, and emotional reflections connected to Diana rather than the diplomatic event itself. Some commentators noted that coverage of the evening seemed less focused on current royal priorities and more focused on revisiting familiar historical narratives. Whether intentional or not, that shift revealed something intriguing about public sentiment. Even nearly 3 decades after her death, Diana continues to occupy a uniquely influential place within the monarchy's story. Few historical royal figures generate the same emotional response. Fewer still can redirect global attention simply through the reappearance of a piece of jewelry associated with their legacy. But if Diana's influence remains so powerful, what does that mean for those attempting to shape the monarchy's future? That question becomes even more relevant when considering the role of Prince William, the Prince of Wales. Unlike previous heirs to the throne, William finds himself balancing two very different responsibilities. On one hand, he must preserve the traditions and stability that have allowed the institution to endure for centuries. On the other, he must guide the monarchy into an era where public expectations have changed dramatically. Today's audiences often expect transparency, emotional authenticity, and personal connection. Those qualities were frequently associated with Diana during her lifetime. Interestingly, there are also qualities many commentators now associate with Catherine. Is that merely coincidence? Or does it suggest that the monarchy has gradually learned from the public response Diana inspired? Some royal analysts believe the answer may lie somewhere in between. They argue that the future king and his wife understand something fundamental about modern royal life. Tradition remains important, but emotional connection is equally essential. A monarchy that appears distant risks losing relevance. A monarchy that balances history with humanity may be far better positioned for long-term success. If that interpretation is correct, then the significance of the tiara extends beyond personal tribute or family memory. Instead, it becomes part of a larger story about how the institution is evolving. Yet not everyone views the situation in the same way. Certain commentators have suggested that the repeated use of Diana-associated symbolism carries potential risks, as well as advantages. While it undoubtedly generates positive public interest, it can also encourage constant comparisons between past and present generations. Those comparisons may be flattering at times, but they can also place enormous expectations on individuals attempting to build their own identities. After all, how does anyone step out from beneath such a powerful historical legacy? How does a future queen create her own distinct chapter while simultaneously honoring one of the most beloved royal figures in modern history? The answer may be more complicated than it first appears, because Catherine's growing influence does not exist in isolation. It unfolds against a backdrop of broader challenges facing the monarchy itself. Questions surrounding succession, public support, modernization, and generational change are becoming increasingly important. Every major public appearance now contributes to a larger conversation about what the crown will eventually look like under future leadership. And that is why seemingly small moments can carry enormous significance. A speech may be forgotten. A diplomatic reception may fade from memory. Yet certain images endure. They become symbols through which people interpret much larger developments. The photograph of the Princess of Wales wearing the lover's not tiara may prove to be one of those images, not because of the diamonds, not because of the pearls, but because of everything people believe those jewels represent. And as discussions surrounding symbolism, influence, and royal legacy continued gaining momentum, attention slowly began turning toward another question entirely, one involving reports of private frustrations, competing visions for the monarchy, and whether certain tensions inside royal circles may be far more complex than the public has been led to believe. Because if the tiara sparked such powerful reactions outside palace walls, what effect might it have had behind them? Because perhaps the most revealing aspect of this entire episode is not the reaction it generated among the public, but what those reactions may tell us about the changing balance of influence within the royal family itself. For generations, the British monarchy has relied on a delicate formula. Continuity must coexist with change. Tradition must adapt without appearing to surrender. Individual personalities must support the institution rather than overshadow it. Yet history repeatedly shows that certain royal figures become larger than the roles they occupy, creating dynamics that can reshape the public's understanding of the crown itself. Diana was one such figure. What makes the current situation particularly intriguing is that Catherine increasingly appears to occupy a similar space in the public imagination, though in a very different way. She is not attempting to revolutionize the monarchy, nor does she project the unpredictability that often surrounded Diana during the later years of her public life. Instead, her influence seems to stem from something quieter but potentially just as powerful: consistency, discipline, and an ability to embody both modernity and tradition simultaneously. That combination may explain why seemingly routine appearances attract such extraordinary attention. Yet there is another layer to the story that often receives less discussion. Whenever public enthusiasm centers heavily around one royal figure, it inevitably creates questions about hierarchy. The monarchy operates through carefully defined structures, But public affection does not always follow official rankings. Throughout history, some royals have commanded greater attention than others regardless of their constitutional position. Could that be happening again? Consider how coverage frequently unfolds following major royal events. Journalists may arrive expecting one narrative, only to discover that public conversation moves in an entirely different direction. The official purpose of an engagement can become secondary to the images, personalities, or symbols that capture people's imagination. That phenomenon matters because perception has always been one of the monarchy's most valuable assets. Unlike elected governments, royal institutions derive much of their strength from public trust, emotional connection, and symbolic authority. The stories people tell about the monarchy often become almost as important as official decisions themselves. When those stories begin centering around particular individuals, the broader institution inevitably takes notice. And this is where a fascinating historical pattern begins to emerge. Royal historians have often observed that periods of transition create subtle shifts in influence long before they become visible through official changes. Future leaders gradually attract more attention. Public expectations begin migrating toward the next generation. Conversations increasingly focus on what comes next rather than what exists today. Viewed through that lens, the intense reaction surrounding Catherine's appearance may reveal something larger than a discussion about jewelry. It may reflect growing public interest in the monarchy beyond the reign of King Charles III. That possibility introduces an entirely different dimension to the story. After all, the Princess of Wales is not merely a senior royal carrying out engagements. She is also the woman widely expected to become queen alongside the future monarch. Every appearance, every decision, and every symbolic gesture is therefore examined not only for what it says about the present, but for what it suggests about the future. And perhaps that explains why the Lover's knot continues attracting such attention whenever it appears. The jewel represents more than memory. It represents succession. It connects three distinct eras of royal history through a single visual symbol. First came Diana, whose relationship with the public transformed expectations surrounding the monarchy. Then came years in which her legacy remained emotionally powerful yet institutionally complicated. Now Catherine wears the same piece while helping define the next generation of royal leadership. The symbolism is difficult to ignore. But what may be even more interesting is how carefully these connections are managed. Royal households rarely operate by accident. Every major appearance involves planning, consultation, protocol, and awareness of public perception. That does not mean every detail carries a secret message. However, it does mean senior royals understand that symbolism matters. Which raises another question. If palace advisors are fully aware of the public response generated by Diana-related imagery, why does the association continue appearing at some of the monarchy's most visible events? Some observers believe the answer lies in long-term strategy. Over recent years, the institution has faced significant challenges, including debates about relevance, modernization, generational expectations, and global scrutiny. In such an environment, symbols capable of creating positive emotional engagement become especially valuable. Diana's legacy remains one of the most emotionally resonant forces connected to modern royal history. Catherine's popularity similarly enjoys widespread public support. Together, those two realities create a powerful narrative bridge between past and future. Yet every strategy carries potential complications. Because while some people view these associations as reassuring, others see them as evidence that the monarchy remains unable to escape certain chapters of its own history. Instead of moving beyond old narratives, critics argue, the institution sometimes appears to revisit them repeatedly. Can a monarchy truly modernize while remaining so closely connected to one of its most defining historical figures? Or is that connection precisely what enables modernization to succeed? The answer remains unclear, but the debate itself reveals how much is at stake. What began as a discussion about a royal appearance has evolved into a conversation about identity, influence, succession, and the future image of the crown. Beneath the surface, competing visions of the monarchy seem to be intersecting, one emphasizing continuity, another emphasizing renewal, and both relying on public perception to maintain legitimacy. And as analysts continued examining the symbolism surrounding Catherine's choice, attention quietly shifted toward a far more sensitive issue. Because if this story is really about influence rather than jewelry, then an even bigger question remains unanswered. Who ultimately benefits from the growing power of Diana's legacy within the modern monarchy, and who might find that reality increasingly difficult to navigate as the next royal era draws closer? Who benefits from Diana's enduring influence may be an important question, but another may be even more consequential. What happens when that influence begins shaping expectations for the monarchy itself? Because expectations can become powerful forces. They affect public perception, media narratives, and sometimes even the strategic decisions made within institutions determined to remain relevant in a rapidly changing world. And in the years ahead, no members of the royal family are likely to face those expectations more intensely than the Prince and Princess of Wales. What makes this moment particularly significant is that Catherine's public role has evolved dramatically over a relatively short period of time. There was a time when she was primarily viewed as the future king's supportive wife, admired for her poise and discretion, but rarely positioned at the center of broader debates about the monarchy's direction. Today, the situation appears very different. Increasingly, discussions about the future of the crown involve her directly. That shift carries advantages, but it also creates pressure. The more symbolic importance attached to a public figure, the more every decision becomes subject to interpretation. Choices that might once have been viewed as routine suddenly acquire additional meaning. Appearances are analyzed. Gestures are scrutinized. Even silence can become a subject of debate. And that dynamic may explain why conversations surrounding the tiara never remained limited to fashion or personal preference. Instead, they evolved into something far larger, a discussion about competing visions of royal leadership. For decades, the monarchy has navigated a delicate balance between institutional authority and emotional connection. Too much emphasis on tradition can create perceptions of distance. Too much focus on personality can risk overshadowing the institution itself. Maintaining equilibrium between those two forces has become one of the defining challenges of modern royal life. Some observers argue that Catherine represents an increasingly successful attempt to strike that balance. Her public image combines discipline with accessibility. She embraces tradition without appearing trapped by it. She rarely enters controversy, yet consistently generates public interest. Those qualities may seem simple on the surface, but within royal circles they represent something extremely valuable: stability. And stability is not merely a personal asset, it is an institutional one. This is where the wider implications of the story begin to emerge. Periods of royal transition have historically placed enormous strain on the monarchy. Public attention naturally shifts toward the next generation. Expectations rise. Comparisons intensify. Every appearance by future leaders becomes part of a larger conversation about what kind of monarchy will eventually emerge. That process is already underway. While King Charles III continues carrying out his duties as sovereign, increasing numbers of commentators focus on the long-term future rather than the immediate present. Discussions frequently return to the same questions. How will the institution evolve? What priorities will define the next reign? Which figures will shape public perception of the crown in the decades ahead? The growing prominence of the Princess of Wales has become inseparable from those discussions. And that reality introduces a potential complication for the wider royal household. Historically, successful monarchies have depended upon a carefully managed distribution of attention. No single figure is meant to eclipse the institution itself. The crown survives by appearing larger than any individual personality. Yet public fascination rarely follows official guidelines. It gravitates toward stories. It gravitates toward symbols. Most importantly, it gravitates toward individuals who appear to embody broader hopes or emotions. That pattern has appeared repeatedly throughout royal history. Certain figures become symbolic representatives of larger ideas. Their popularity begins reflecting not only who they are, but what people believe they represent. Many analysts believe Catherine now occupies precisely that position. Yet symbolism can create unexpected consequences. Because once someone becomes a symbol, people begin attaching their own interpretations, expectations, and narratives to every public appearance. Events that might otherwise pass quietly become magnified. Neutral decisions acquire emotional significance. Ordinary moments evolve into perceived statements. Could that be what happened here? Some commentators suggest the reaction surrounding the tiara revealed less about the jewelry itself and more about the public's desire for continuity during a period of change. Others believe it reflected something deeper, a growing emotional investment in the future generation of royal leadership. Either way, the intensity of the response offered an important clue. Public attention appears increasingly focused on where the monarchy is heading rather than where it has been. That shift inevitably affects everyone involved. For palace advisors, it creates new communication challenges. For senior royals, it alters the context surrounding public appearances. For those preparing to inherit greater responsibilities, it raises expectations that may prove difficult to satisfy. And perhaps most significantly, it forces the institution to confront a question that cannot be postponed indefinitely. What aspects of royal history should be carried forward into the future, and which should remain firmly in the past? The answer is unlikely to satisfy everyone. Some prefer continuity above all else. Others believe modernization requires a more decisive break from previous eras. The monarchy must somehow navigate between those competing expectations while preserving both legitimacy and public support. That task becomes even more complex when powerful historical figures continue exerting influence long after their passing. Diana's legacy remains one of those forces, not because palace officials deliberately invoke it at every opportunity, but because public memory continues keeping it alive. Every comparison, every photograph, every symbolic association reinforces a connection that shows little sign of fading. And as this connection grows increasingly intertwined with perceptions of the monarchy's future, another realization begins to emerge. Perhaps the real story was never about whether a particular royal felt overshadowed or uncomfortable. Perhaps it was never even about the tiara itself. Instead, the larger revelation may be that the institution has entered a new phase, one in which legacy, succession, public expectation, and historical memory are colliding in ways that could influence the monarchy for years to come. And if that is true, then the final question becomes impossible to ignore. Because once we look beyond the headlines, the symbolism, and the speculation, what does this entire episode ultimately reveal about the future king, the future queen, and the direction the monarchy appears to be taking as its next chapter draws ever closer? Because perhaps the most important realization to emerge from this entire episode is that the monarchy's greatest challenges are no longer purely constitutional, political, or ceremonial. Increasingly, they're emotional. They revolve around memory, identity, and the relationship between public perception and royal legitimacy in an age where symbolism often carries as much weight as official authority. That may explain why a single appearance generated such extraordinary discussion. What people were responding to was not simply a piece of royal jewelry. They were responding to what it represented. In many ways, the reaction exposed a deeper truth about the modern monarchy. The institution is no longer judged solely by its traditions or historical achievements. It is increasingly evaluated through its ability to create emotional connections that feel authentic, meaningful, and relevant to contemporary audiences. This is where the significance of Catherine's position becomes particularly important. Unlike previous generations who often maintained greater distance from public sentiment, the Princess of Wales has emerged during a period when emotional intelligence, relatability, and personal resilience carry enormous value. Her public role increasingly reflects those expectations. Whether attending major state occasions, representing the nation abroad, or navigating personal challenges under intense scrutiny, she has become part of a broader transformation in how royal leadership is perceived. And that transformation may ultimately prove more consequential than any single event. Throughout much of the 20th century, royal success was often measured through stability and continuity alone. Today, however, continuity is only part of the equation. Public trust increasingly depends upon visibility, empathy, and the ability to reflect the values of modern society while preserving centuries of tradition. Balancing those competing demands is extraordinarily difficult, yet it may determine how future generations view the crown. The fascinating aspect of this shift is that it appears to be unfolding gradually rather than dramatically. There has been no official declaration, no institutional announcement, no public strategy document outlining a new vision for the monarchy. Instead, the transformation seems to reveal itself through moments, symbols, and perceptions that accumulate over time until a larger picture begins to emerge. Could this be one of those moments? Many royal observers believe so. Not because it changed the monarchy overnight, but because it highlighted where public attention naturally gravitates. Increasingly, conversations surrounding the future of the institution focus on qualities associated with the next generation of leadership. The public appears deeply interested in how the future king and future queen will define their era, what values they will emphasize, and how they will navigate challenges that previous generations never faced. That growing curiosity carries profound implications. Every institution depends upon its ability to adapt without losing its identity. Adapt too slowly and relevance begins to fade. Adapt too quickly, and the foundations that provide legitimacy may weaken. The monarchy has spent centuries attempting to navigate that balance, surviving crises that once appeared existential. Yet modern challenges are unique. Today's monarchy operates in a world of constant scrutiny, instant communication, and global audiences capable of interpreting every image from countless perspectives simultaneously. In such an environment, symbols often travel faster and resonate more deeply than official statements. That reality helps explain why certain moments become larger than anyone initially expects. What appeared to be a routine appearance evolved into a broader conversation about succession, public affection, institutional identity, and the future direction of royal leadership. The discussion revealed that people are not merely watching royal events. They are actively searching for clues about what comes next. And perhaps that is the true reason royal observers paid such close attention. Because beneath the debates, speculation, and commentary lies a much larger question. What kind of monarchy is emerging? Will the institution continue relying primarily on tradition and ceremony, or will it increasingly embrace a model centered on emotional connection and public engagement? Can future leaders successfully combine both approaches? And if they can, what might that mean for the crown's long-term relationship with the public? Those questions extend far beyond one evening, one photograph, or one piece of jewelry. They touch upon the very future of the institution itself. History suggests that monarchies survive not because they remain unchanged, but because they learn how to evolve while preserving their essential purpose. Every generation contributes something new. Every era leaves its own imprint. The challenge lies in determining which qualities should be carried forward and which should remain part of the past. In that respect, this story may ultimately reveal less about personal relationships and more about historical transition. We may be witnessing the gradual emergence of a new royal chapter, one shaped by different expectations, different forms of leadership, and a different relationship between the institution and the people it serves. If so, the symbols attracting public attention today may eventually be remembered not as isolated moments, but as early signs of a larger transformation already underway. And that may be why this conversation continues, resonating long after the event itself has passed. Because when people look at the image that sparked this discussion, they are not simply seeing a princess wearing a historic tiara. They are seeing history, memory, succession, and the future converging in a single moment. They are seeing an institution attempting to honor its past while preparing for what comes next. Most importantly, they are witnessing a reminder that the monarchy's future may ultimately depend on its ability to balance continuity with change, tradition with humanity, and authority with connection. So perhaps the real question was never whether one appearance upset palace dynamics or revived old comparisons. Perhaps the more important question is whether moments like this reveal the blueprint for the monarchy's future, a future in which legacy remains powerful, but where the next generation increasingly shapes the narrative. And that is what makes the story so compelling. Not because of diamonds, not because of headlines, but because it offers a glimpse into how the next chapter of royal history may already be quietly unfolding before our eyes. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the royal family, Prince William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, King Charles III, Princess, and the future of the monarchy, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next royal analysis. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video. Because sometimes the most revealing royal stories are not about what is said publicly, but about the future quietly taking shape beneath the surface.